Morning, church. I hope you weathered the storm last night okay. I know there's been a lot of destruction, especially down in South Alabama. Be praying for our son Garrett, who is in Enterprise. They experienced a lot of wind and rain down in that area. Also, from my brother Steve's wife, Amy, and her mother, Betty. They're actually caught, trapped, I guess, as it were, down in Gulf Shores. They're okay, but they can't get out. So be in prayer for our family and the families of all those who are down in the Gulf Coast area where that storm, where Hurricane Sally hit. A lot of devastation over in Pensacola, also in Mobile, and of course Gulf Shores and Dauphin Island and Orange Beach. Actually, that's where Amy and Betty are, in Orange Beach. But just be praying for them and praying for this recovery effort that is underway today. And so we're going to continue our study in the book of Acts, chapter 21, beginning in verse 17. Paul has arrived in Jerusalem, and he begins to share his report of the good work of God among the Gentiles. Dr. Luke writes, "And when we had come to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. On the following day, Paul went in with us to James, and all the elders were present. When we had greeted them, he told in detail those things which God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. And when they had heard it, they glorified the Lord." This was a joyous occasion, and upon arriving in Jerusalem, Paul met with the leaders of the church and gave them a full report of his work in the areas of preaching and planting churches, everything that God had done in his ministry efforts. The elders in Jerusalem were thankful for what God was doing among the Gentiles. They saw some of the Gentile converts who had come with Paul and could tell of their genuine love for and commitment to Jesus. And the elders responded to Paul, "You see, brother, how many myriad of Jews there are who have believed, and they are all zealous for the law, but they have been informed about you, that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, nor to walk according to the customs. What then? The assembly must certainly meet, for they will hear that you have come." The elders of Jerusalem were happy for what God was doing among the Gentiles, yet in Jerusalem, the Christian community was almost entirely made up of Jews, or people who had a Jewish background, and these Christians still valued many of the Jewish laws and customs. They were still zealous for the law. The Christian community of Jerusalem had heard bad and false rumors about Paul. They heard that he had become essentially anti-Jewish and told Jewish Christians that they were wrong in believing in these old Jewish laws and old Jewish customs. But based on the writings in Romans 14, we see that Paul didn't have a problem with Jewish Christians who wanted to continue to observe old custom and laws. It seems that he himself did so sometimes, such as when he took and fulfilled a vow of consecration, probably the Nazirite vow, which he fulfilled earlier in chapter 18. You'll remember that when we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. So Paul seemed fine with the Jews following these old customs as long as they didn't think it made them more righteous before God. So the leaders of the Jerusalem church met and made a recommendation. "Therefore, do what we tell you. We have 4 men who have taken a vow. Take them and be purified with them and pay their expenses so that they may shave their heads, and that all may know that those things of which they were informed concerning you are nothing, but that you yourself also walk orderly and keep the law. But concerning the Gentiles, you believe we have written and decided that they should observe no such thing, except that they should keep themselves from the things offered to idols, from blood, from things strangled, and from sexual immorality. They advised Paul to join and sponsor these 4 Christians who had a Jewish background. This particular vow of consecration was probably similar to Paul's Nazirite vow mentioned earlier. The Jewish elders believed this would convince everyone that Paul did not preach against Jewish laws and customs for those Christians who wanted to observe them. So Paul agreed to do this, to demonstrate that he never taught Christian Jews to forsake Moses, nor to or to not circumcise their children, or that they should ignore Jewish customs. Then Paul took them in, and the next day, having been purified with them, entered the temple to announce the expiration of the days of purification, at which time an offering should be made for each one of them. Paul had shown them that their ceremonies were useless but not destructive, that they were only dangerous when they depended on them for salvation. Listen to how Paul addresses this incident later in his writing. Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 9:20, "And to the Jews I became a Jew, that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, that I might win those who are under the law." In other words, he became all things to all people. He tried to reach the Jewish people by, agreeing to do these vows, as long as they didn't think these vows would lead to salvation. And it's important to understand that this offering, an animal sacrifice, was not in any way for the purpose of atonement or forgiveness. Paul absolutely understood that the only sacrifice was the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross that atoned for sin. Yet not every sacrifice in the Jewish system was for atonement. Many were for thanksgiving or dedication, as this one was. Then in verse 27 we read, "Now when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him, crying out, 'Men of Israel, help! This is the man who teaches all men everywhere against the people, the law, and this place. And furthermore, he also brought Greeks into the temple who have defiled this holy place.' For they had previously seen Trophimus the Ephesian with him in the city, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. And all the city was disturbed, and the people ran together and seized Paul and dragged him out of the temple, and immediately the doors were shut." Now, this crowd claimed that Paul was against the people of Israel, the Mosaic law, and the temple, but these accusations were unfounded. Paul simply rejected trust in any of these as a basis for righteousness before God, which comes only through Jesus Christ. The charges against Paul in Acts 21:28 were an echo of the charges Stephen was executed for in Acts chapter 6. Paul helped preside over that execution. Now he's accused in a similar way. The crowd was large because it was during a festival. It was enraged because they believed Paul not only preached against the people, the law, and the temple, but also profaned the temple by bringing Gentiles into its inner courts. It was absolutely prohibited for Gentiles to go beyond the designated court of the Gentiles in the temple grounds. Signs were posted which read in both Greek and Latin, "No foreigner may enter within the barricade which surrounds the temple and enclosure. Anyone who is caught trespassing will bear personal responsibility for his ensuing death." They were serious about this. The Romans were so sensitive to this that they authorized the Jews to execute anyone that offended in this way, even if the offender was a Roman citizen. And Paul was certainly a Roman citizen. In verse 21, we read, "Now that they're seeking to kill him, news came to the commander of the garrison that all Jerusalem was in an uproar. He immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the commander and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. Then the commander came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains. And he asked who he was and what he had done. And some among the multitude cried out one thing and some another. So when he could not ascertain the truth because of the tumult, he commanded him to be taken into the barracks. When he reached the stairs, he had to be carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the mob. For the multitude of the people followed after, crying out, "Away with him!" Paul had been seized by this enraged mob, and the mob didn't just want to take him out of the temple courts, they wanted to kill him right there in the outer courtyard area of the Temple Mount. Paul had been near death because of the attacks of murderous mobs before, and he must have thought, here we go again. From the Tower of Antonia at the northwest corner of the Temple Mount, more than 500 Roman soldiers were stationed only 2 flights of stairs away from the court of the Gentiles. The Romans, however, didn't sympathize with Paul, but they were interested in keeping public order. So they arrested Paul, both for his own protection and to remove the cause of the uproar. As Paul was handcuffed to a soldier on either side of him, perhaps he remembered the prophecy of Agabus. And perhaps when the mob cried out for his death, Paul could have remembered when he was part of such a mob when they martyred Stephen. When the crowd shouted away with him, they meant to remove him from the earth. They wanted Paul dead. Now we're going to stop here today. I want to ask you a few questions. The first one is this. Let me ask you, how strong is your conviction? Are you willing to lay your life on the line for Jesus? When you think of religious persecution, what comes to your mind? Christians being killed overseas? Churches being burned overseas? Preachers being jailed overseas? When you think of religious persecution, is it something that happens somewhere else in the world but not here where we live? Actually, religious persecution takes on many forms. Religious liberties and rights that are lost. Lost in the workplace and in our schools. Taking away prayer, taking away the teaching of the Bible, other religious liberties and rights that we've lost, and, taking the 10 Commandments down, things like that. What about intolerance by our society toward Christianity, but not toward other religions? People like Bill Maher and others speaking out against Christians. There's religious persecution going on in our own community, in our own state, in our own nation. Maybe not so much here in the Bible Belt, but if you venture outside of the state of Alabama, you're going to find that people are not as tolerant toward our faith as the people that we live in and around here in this area. So my question to you is this: are you going to be like Peter on the night when he denied Christ 3 times, when he was confronted by a little girl around a campfire, and let this religious persecution stop you from sharing the good news of Jesus Christ? Or will you be more like Paul and stand up for Christ Jesus? Ask yourself today, how far am I willing to go for Jesus? The right time to make that decision is today, not when you come under fire. Because when you wait and try to make that decision when you come under fire, you probably won't make the right decision. The time to make that decision, how far am I willing to go for Jesus? You need to make that decision today. And then be prepared if that comes your way. I hope that this has been a meaningful Bible study for you today. I pray that, as always, you'll be safe, you'll be healthy, and stay in Christ's arms. God bless you all. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.